I'd like to let you know that we have three wonderful speakers today: Cindy Robertson, Bev Johnston, and Kathryn Kellam. And they are members also of our Master Gardener group and very nicely have volunteered to share their experiences dealing with stormwater. Cindy, I'm turning it over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Colleen. And thank you everyone else for joining us this morning. We're going to jump right in. Okay, so what are we going to be talking about today? First, we're going to be talking about the importance of managing stormwater. Second, we'll talk about strategies for managing and harvesting stormwater runoff. And finally, we're going to hear three practical experiences having to do with stormwater management. And when I heard that we were giving this public presentation, I kind of leapt at the opportunity because I know that I had been dealing with stormwater issues of my own, and I'm very pleased to report that we came upon a really great solution and now are enjoying our yard because of it much more. Okay, so what is stormwater runoff to begin with? Well, it can be rain or melted snow that doesn't really soak into the ground and instead it runs off. So this picture at the top provides a really good example. You can see the water just literally running off the sidewalk here down the curb, and then it goes down the street. And in the image below that, those yellow areas are impervious surfaces, which can't absorb the rain or snow. And so you see here we have roofs and the private walkways, the driveway, the patio in the back. All of those are hard surfaces. And of course, it makes sense that the rain just can't soak in there, and so it runs off. So this is a really great image of what happens to the stormwater and why we should care about it. So what happens is you can see all sorts of different kinds of debris in the yard. There's trash, there's animal feces and potentially fertilizer that people use. And what happens is the water collects that and drags it with it into the stormwater, which then eventually winds up in our local streams and waterways, and it's very harmful to our ecosystem. So that's why it's so important to try to capture the rainwater or snowfall that's occurring in your own yard and using it for your gardens, which is the best place for it. So what is the impact of runoff to homeowners? Well, those of us who live in Alexandria and Arlington, I know many of us have experienced stormwater issues. The top photo here is a really good example of soil erosion. Your beds can leach off the mulch and other soil when you have a hard rain. There can be stormwater seepage or basement flooding. That's happened to me. Pooling or ponding of water. This bottom photo is a good example of that. And you'll see other images from my own yard that demonstrate the ponding of water in your yard. The water can flow from your own property to other neighbors, which can cause issues. And if water seeps into your foundation, it can cause structural damage. And basically, it's just a real pain because parts of your yard are unusable for their intended purpose. So we're going to talk about several different strategies for stormwater management. Rain barrels is one topic, and rain gardens, downspout redirection, cisterns, dry wells, French drains. You can also remove pavement and create a more permeable space. We'll talk about dry creek beds and also the benefits of planting water-loving native plants. So one thing that I didn't realize is that some plants really love to have their roots soaking in pooling water, which I unfortunately didn't select those, and so lost a lot of plants, as I'll talk about later. But there are some plants that actually adore lots of rain and soggy conditions, which we'll learn about later. Okay, so now the fun part. We're going to talk about three case stories from my own personal experience as well as Kathryn and Bev's. And we used different methods to handle our own stormwater issues. We wanted to reduce the impact and collect the stormwater in our yards. So the way in which we'll present our case studies is first we'll focus on like what was the problem that we had, what were the strategies that we used to manage it, and then we want to pass on the lessons learned so that you can benefit from our own personal experiences. So here's my story. I'm Cindy, and this is what my yard looked like after some rain. So you can see there that the bench in the back is just like in the middle of a pond, so not very usable, and a huge amount of pooling like in the back corner and along the side of my yard. So here's just some arrows pointing to the spaces here, this back corner, and right along the bed line here, it would just pool. And the more rain we got, the more it would extend into the yard. And then in addition to that, there were other parts of my yard that were also really soggy and would take days to drain. So it was not very beneficial to me because I had 3 kids who were wanting to use the yard and we couldn't. So as I mentioned before, the plants that I had in that bed were not water loving plants. And so I lost a lot of plants because of the pooling that would occur. When I was trying to figure out like, okay, why is this happening? One theory we had is that we used wood mulch at the time. And so I think the beds were kind of getting higher and higher as we stacked more mulch on them. And the bed would end up creating like a valley along the bed line, which is perhaps why the water was pooling there. I also think that our yard kind of naturally sloped in that direction, so the water naturally went that way too. Now, additionally, our property is at the top of a hill, and so we have neighbors all downhill from us. And although we never had any direct complaints about water management, I had heard stories of runoff from neighbors below us going to their neighbor's house. And because it was capturing debris on the way, it was blocking drainage systems in their driveways, and so would flood into their garage space or basement. So it was definitely an issue on our street managing stormwater. So what were the strategies that I used to manage the stormwater problem? It was a multi-pronged approach. I decided to just throw everything at it. So we installed a French drain underneath that pathway that you see. It's a permeable pathway. We also regraded the lawn, and we planted water-loving native plants that would enjoy the soaking that they got. Okay, so here you see photos of the process of installing the French drain with catch basins. Now, this circular patio at the top is the one that we placed in that corner where the bench was. And basically, I would think to myself, well, it's a pool, but it would actually be a really nice place to sit and see the yard from a different perspective and have a nice fire pit. So initially, I was thinking like gravel, kind of a permeable patio back there. The mason I was working with said, well, why don't we install it in cement and then we'll put a French drain all the way around it to manage the storm water. So that's what we did. There's a trench around the patio in the back. And then, as you can see, the catch basins, they're about 18 inches by 18 inches. They're like cubes, and they have circles cut out in either side of them, which attach to the permeable plastic tubing that you see this worker handling in the bottom right photo. And what he's doing there is he's pulling on this like sleeve that prevents dirt and other debris from getting into the permeable pipe, which has little holes in it. And so that pipe is connecting the catch basins. I have 3 total. So you see 2 here in that image, and there was one closer to the circular patio. But anyway, what they did was they installed this piping because it would absorb the water. The water would flow into the pipe and into the catch basins. And then the idea is that the water stays there and then is slowly released over time into the yard. So you get the benefit of the rainwater without any detriments. Here's another photo of it a few days later. So you see that there's gravel now all the way around the back circle patio. The gravel's been filled in on top of the piping between the 3 catch basins. But it's funny, I designed this with the mason who put in my patio, and all of a sudden I was like, well, this is kind of a problem because I don't really want to see the catch basins, which are fairly unsightly. And I was struggling with how to plant something that would camouflage the catch basins when there was gravel on either side of them. So it left me only one spot, the soil kind of to one side. But I said, well, why can't we just scooch the path over? So that's exactly what we did, so that the path would cover the gravel. So rather than the path being embedded in dirt, we decided to use decorative gravel around the flagstones. So there's an image here at the top where you can see from the top what it would look like. We had this brick kind of on its side to hold the gravel in. And then we would have the flagstone pavers with decorative rock. And then you can see here the worker is like scooching the path over so that it covers the basin. And then this is the cross section. So this is what it looks like from the side. Here's the flagstone on top. It's surrounded by the gravel. And then the catch basin is underneath and connected to the pipes. So all the water flows around the flagstone and into the catch basin. And then here is what it looks like from the top, although this we then covered up with the gravel, and it worked really well. So as I mentioned, we also used another strategy, which was to regrade the lawn. We rented a sod cutter, and I thought that I might be able to handle it myself, and I did test it out in the yard, but it's a heavy piece of machinery. So it was very nice to be working with a contractor who have workers to do it. We peeled back the soil. Then I contacted a local provider of bulk purchase of soil and compost. And they actually have these mixes you can buy, and they just dump it off by the truckload. It's a very easy delivery system. So I put a tarp in my driveway. The truck came, dropped off the soil, and then we just wheelbarrowed it into the yard, used rakes and things to regrade the lawn. And then we rolled the sod that we had cut back over the soil. I have to say that the compost soil mix has benefited my entire garden and yard. It just looked the best it's ever looked after we did that. So that was a side benefit. And then, as I mentioned, we also planted a lot of native water-loving plants, including red twig dogwood, winterberry, a river birch, and a swamp magnolia. All of them really enjoy wet conditions. I didn't picture here a button bush, but I also have a couple of those. Although I will say the local ecotype grows like 10 feet high and wide, even though it's amenable to pruning, but I think I'm going to move my button bushes to where they can really grow to their full capacity. But there are lots of native water-loving plants that just really enjoy those wet conditions. And our website has an ideal place where you can click on just those plants in particular. And I used it to find these types of plants. It was really helpful to be able to consult our website for that purpose. You just go to the plants, and then you can pull up plants for a purpose. And I looked for plants that enjoyed wet conditions. So what was my experience with neighbors? As I mentioned, we never had any direct complaints, but we did have downhill neighbors. And, whenever you take on a big project, people get curious. And so I would invite our neighbors to our backyard to see what was happening and show them how we were capturing the water that would benefit them. And they were, of course, super appreciative. And it helped establish this collaborative process where we could work together. And they knew that we were trying to manage it at the top of the hill. And I think it really helped them understand and educate them about different ways that you could manage stormwater. So it was really beneficial. So what were the lessons learned? I found it really beneficial to record the problem we were experiencing with photos and notes. I would see the pooling, and then I would check it every few hours to see if it was draining and take photos and just keep notes, because that was beneficial too when we called a professional company. It was an engineering firm that managed stormwater issues. And when they came out, we could better educate them as to what exactly our problem was. Now, as I say, it was helpful for us to consult an engineering firm. They were recommending dry creek beds, which are similar in that they create a pathway for the water, and they can be quite beautiful. Bev has a dry creek bed, and they're very beautiful and can be used to enhance the design of your backyard. But what I got to thinking about is, how did I really want to use my yard? And because I have a large family and we had friends over frequently, it was nice to think about different areas where the kids could hang out with their friends and we could hang out with the grown-ups. A dry creek bed is pretty, but I need more seating. So it was nice to come up with ideas with the expert and then make a decision that was best for us. And then I thought, well, I think I can handle this myself. So I hired a contractor and we collaborated together about how to manage it. And he had some experience with drainage issues too. So together we figured out a way to manage it. As I mentioned, we are super happy with our yard now. The stormwater issue, I think, prompted us to build some patios and create that path that have actually made our yard even more usable than it was before. And our remediation effort of putting in the French drains and buying new native plants that love water enabled us to get a 50% reduction through the city of Alexandria for our stormwater management fee, which is an annual fee that they assess. So there are financial benefits as well. Anyway, so it was a very positive experience to manage that stormwater issue. With that, I will ask if there are any questions.
Cindy, there are no questions, so we can move on to Bev. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you.
So hi, everybody. I'm Bev, and I am a Master Gardener of Northern Virginia for the last 19 years. And I'm going to tell you the story of my stormwater challenges and the runoff that we had in our backyard in central Arlington, and what my husband and I have done over the years, little by little, to address the challenges. So one thing you can see is we have a very long and narrow backyard. And if you see from here, from the left to the right is actually moving downhill. So we have a few uphill neighbors and we have a few downhill neighbors. As the area in our neighborhood reaches Lubber Run, the park and the stream is to our right down the hill on this photograph. So this is an old stream bed. So we garden in an old stream bed and have to deal with all the fun of doing so in so many different ways. What we notice is that, we have this stormwater that passes through our backyard from the left to the right on its way naturally down to the stream where it wants to go and where it had gone for probably thousands and thousands of years before our neighborhood came into being. And we had exactly what Cindy had mentioned before. We had water pooling in different parts of the yard, and we had a lot of washing out of certain areas of the yard after large rainstorms. We have a path that moves all the way from the front of the yard all the way to the back, and water would come down from the neighbor's yard and wash out the mulch that we had on the path. The kids had a space back there with a sandbox and other things in the middle of the yard, and it would just get washed out all the time. And it was a bit of a mess, and we couldn't really use it. So addressing this problem in different ways helped us to be able to better utilize all of our yard. Another problem that we have is that over time, we've all experienced this increased water volume and the rate of rainfall, right, in the last few years. And this is causing not just the regular washout, significant events were causing bigger problems, including some flooding in the building that I'm in right now. And, we've seen our neighborhood change a lot. We've had more impervious surfaces due to a lot of additions on houses, a lot more construction going on. And we've lost a lot of large tree canopies in our neighborhood and in the surrounding parks, and even right near our properties, the neighbors right around us. And they've had very limited replacement or new plantings of large trees or even shrubs. So as Cindy had mentioned, those plants are really, and trees are really, really important ways that we address stormwater as well. So we can do what we can on our space, but the folks who are around us were not replanting trees and shrubs that they had lost through drought and storms and the like. So significant problems growing over time. We've taken a several-pronged approach to addressing the stormwater that's coming down the hills and through our yards. One of them, we've directed downspouts to underground French drains, and we've done that underneath garden beds, similar to the way Cindy has done, where we don't want to see the drains if we don't have to. You'll see that I've incorporated some of the drains into a design element, but generally we have had these French drains dug. And the one on the bottom left, there's actually a French drain that comes all the way from the downspout of our house down one path, and it makes a right-hand turn, and it comes down under this other path. So we don't really see that French drain, but we know that it's working. And then on the right-hand side picture, you can see a French drain in the making, where we've dug a large trench, filled it not only with gravel, but there is a type of French drain system where there's the regular perforated pipe you would see that would collect the water, and then the water can drain through that perforated pipe, and you can direct that pipe to where you need to. That perforated pipe is within a sleeve that has a material that's very similar to what we would see in packing material, right? That popcorn packing material. So that just makes the whole system really lighter. It serves the same purpose as gravel, but it's not as heavy, and you don't have to move all of that gravel from the street into your yard. So we found that this has really been an easier way for us to put in multiple French drains in our yard. We've also have a pond in our yard. And when we have very large rainfalls, again, with that large volume, the pond actually overflows. So we've got water coming down, and then the French drain was handling that, but the pond was overflowing more often than the last few years. So we've actually put in yet another French drain right here. So there's a French drain under this path. And then there's a French drain parallel to it in this new area right here. And I've just kind of created as a design element between these decorative kind of stones and the mulch path that we have here. And this also prevented this area here from getting washed out, right? So this extra water would come out of here, out of the pond, and I would get a full washout all over here. And the plants were dying because they didn't want all of that new water. And you'll see here in these next pictures, this French drain goes directly into a rain garden down here. So one of the big things that my husband and I have done is made sure that we keep our water on site. Not only is that a good practice for stormwater management, but we actually get to utilize that water for our plants. All of this water that's draining through the perforated pipe, it's actually watering this area in the lawns, and it's watering the trees and all of that under here. It's a way to actually be able to utilize that water. We have 2 rain gardens, right? At the one rain garden that I'd mentioned here on this upper right-hand corner that comes straight from the pond overflow, goes into this beautiful rain garden here that has a number of water-loving plants. And over here, we have another one. You can see my neighbor up here. All the water from actually 2 neighbors up here comes all the way down through here and into this rain garden. And they lost several very large oak trees. I would say probably a half dozen very large oak trees have come down and had to be cut down that have died through storms and tree death over the last 10 years here. So lots of water coming down through here, and it's in this particular rain garden. And I have what is a fairly relatively new dwarf bulb cypress that's beautiful year round, a number of ostrich ferns, a Virginia sweet spires in this area, lots of fun stuff. And that looks really fabulous here. This is our dry creek bed, and it's kind of hard to see, but it comes from a different area of the yard. But it comes from my other neighbors. And we actually just followed this dry creek bed. All we did was keep track of where that water was naturally flowing through the yard. And we had somebody else put in that dry creek bed, but we helped to design that whole space. And we made sure that the areas along the side also had plants that were water loving. I have a series of banana trees, for example, right here. We also have a rain barrel, and I know that Kathryn's going to talk a little bit about rain barrel, so I won't do it. We have a rain barrel that helps to slow the water coming off of a separate garden room that I'm in right now. But we just wanted to make sure that that water was directed away from the house, and that overflow was going to go and help water some plant on the side of that building. And like I had said before, we planted a number of water-loving plants in the area where the lawn is. Just got lots of water-loving plants where the water wants to flow down here. And I've also reduced that lawn area over time to create more permeable space as well. I think one of the things is we've had a really great experience working with our neighbors. We have fabulous neighbors upstream and downstream who get to see a really beautiful view of our garden from their geographic perspective. They always appreciate the work that we're doing. And we provide them a lot of advice and guidance on tree planting and how they can support improved stormwater management in their yards as well. We've coordinated on building a shared rain garden in the adjacent downstream backyard. So we share plants, we support one another as we get our rain gardens up to snuff in the spring and cleaning them up now in the fall, those kind of things. And then we've coordinated the conjunction of the dry creek bed as well and the French drain. And then we've done some other advising on direction of stormwater with our neighbors and friends there. So a lot of lessons learned is to be a good neighbor, discuss your common stormwater challenges, and kind of co-create these solutions together. We solve those problems and get those actions together as needed. And really looking at that, knowing that that stormwater has been increasing in volume and intensity over time, and that you can't ignore it. How much I wanted the stormwater not to wash out my paths after every rain, I had to really address it. And we knew that this was affecting the riparian zone and the turbidity of Lover Run too. So we felt we had a responsibility to keep that natural resource as healthy as possible. And we just keep reiterating, right? Like I said, we realized that we had to put in yet another French drain to deal with some other stormwater maintenance issues, and we just keep figuring it out. And then the other thing is, like, we try to do a lot of DIY. Gardening is a hobby for my husband and myself, but sometimes we can't do big projects ourselves. We make sure we plan ahead. We make any savings. Like we said, we coordinate with our neighbors so that we can share costs and other things like that. But we use professionals when we do need to use professionals. And so that's my story. And I think we'll take some questions before we turn it over to Kathryn.
Thank you, Bev. It sounds like you live in a great neighborhood. There was interest in your lightweight French drain, particularly who was the manufacturer of either that system or the lightweight material you used as an alternative to gravel.
I'll find that for you and come back on that.
And there's just a breaking question now. If you have any suggestions to reduce the velocity of stormwater.
Some of that is going to come down no matter what, right? I think you got to do what you got to do. Kathy will talk about her great system in her backyard that she uses through cisterns and rain barrels. And my rain barrel, like I said, that addresses the velocity of that water coming off of the roof, and that would have been pouring down the side of this building. And so it slows the rainwater. It slows it. It's not going to make it go away. The water's coming no matter what. But now it's just like managing in that and slowing that down. I will say that the neighbor upstream for me, she put in some French drains in her yard recently that has actually captured the water on site for her. And that has actually reduced the volume and that rate of water coming through our yard, because now it is settling in to hers. And she's got a couple trees that are now maturing as well, water-loving trees, some big river birches that I can see. So that's helping as well. But the water is going to come. I can't stop it from raining, but I can keep it on site and have my neighbors keep it on site as much as we possibly can.
So it sounds like part of the solution is to have good neighbors upstream.
Yes, we call it OPW, other people's water problem. We've got an OPW, other people's water problem.
Okay, that does it on the questions, and I guess you'll come back and put the info on the lightweight French drain in the chat, and we'll move on now with Kathryn. Thank you.
Okay, hello everyone. It's Kathryn Kellam, and it's great to have you all here with us today. My story is a little bit different than what we have seen before, in that we did not actually have a stormwater management problem on our property. What we recognize is that we have a stormwater opportunity, and that is to harvest rainwater. And we do that with 2 rain barrels and a cistern. And by way of getting started, what do I mean by rain barrel? What is a rain barrel? It's a tank. It's a tank that we use to capture rainwater that comes down our roof, through the gutters, into the downspout, and we collect it from the downspout, put it in that tank, and then we can use it later instead of tap water in our yards and gardens. A cistern is exactly the same thing as a rain barrel. It's just bigger. It has more storage capacity, and some of them are so huge that they have to be buried underground. Now, we have a cistern, but it's not that huge, as you'll see in just a few minutes. I've had conversations with neighbors about installing rain barrels, and of course, it's a voluntary thing. It's not something you have to do. It's an investment. And what I try to help them understand is that it is truly a win-win-win investment. It's great for the environment, it's great for our municipal water supply, and it's really great for our gardens. You heard Cindy speak early on about the environment and the impact that stormwater can have in terms of picking up chemicals and other pollutants and taking them into our waterways. And this is so important in our local communities that our municipal governments, the City of Alexandria and Arlington County, will give us the opportunity to reduce our storm management fees by taking advantage of some of these things. And like Cindy, we've reduced our fee by 50%, and rain barrels have been an important part of that. Now, with the municipal water supply, some people think that using, rain barrels, cisterns doesn't really have that big of an impact in terms of our use of tap water, but it does. And the Environmental Protection Agency says that during the summer, household water use is actually in the neighborhood of 40% of lawn and garden watering. So it's outdoor uses that don't need treated tap water. And the EPA also says that when homeowners switch and begin using rainwater through rain barrels and cisterns, then during peak summer months, they save on average about 1,300 gallons of treated tap water. So that is, for a single household, that is a big impact. Now, as a gardener, my favorite thing about rain barrels is that it's great for the garden. And our plants love rainwater. It's soft water. It doesn't have things like lime or calcium in it. It's pure hydration. It makes it so easy for the plants to absorb it. So it's great for our gardens. It's great for our containers. You can put it in a fountain. You can put it in a fish pond. And it's really valuable during times of dry weather and droughts like we've had so much of lately. There's another wonderful feature of rainwater, and that is that it's chlorine free. And if you take a look at the photo here, you'll see that in our backyard, we have a pond and we have fish in the pond. And at different points during the year when it's very dry or it's very hot, the water level starts to drop a bit and we need to top it up. When we have to use tap water to do that, we're getting not just chlorine, but chloramine, which is what I think most municipalities use in their treated water. Chloramine is actually a very stable form of chlorine. It doesn't break up easily. It doesn't break up in the sunshine. It's very, very stable. When we put that in a fish pond, it can kill our fish. We then have to treat the water again with chemicals that will break up the chloramine. When we use rainwater from our cistern, we just put the water in and we're done. It's great for the fish. It's wonderful. So another great value for us there. Now, before I show you my 3 rain barrels, I want to just plant a few questions for you to think about in terms of bringing rain barrels into your environment. And the first thing is knowing where your downspouts are located. Where are they? And then what is the general environment around there where you would be able to use that rainwater, where it would be valuable to you as a resource, because that location and then how you want to use that water will start to tell you what kind of tank you need for that space and for that purpose. So how big it is, what kind of shape it is, and how you would want to access the water. Now, this image here is not actually of one of my rain barrels. I saw this when I was walking through the neighborhood and clicked a picture because I think that it really helps to demonstrate a few features and factors about rain barrels. First of all, you can see here a hose that's going from a downspout to the top of the rain barrel, and you just make out there's a diverter unit that's been installed on the downspout. So that diverts the rainwater over to the top of the rain barrel. You'll also see that this rain barrel is elevated. It's sitting up on a stand, and that has the nice feature of improving the gravity feed, the power with which water comes out of that rain barrel when you access it. So there are a couple of ways that this homeowner can access. There's access on the opposite side. You can see there's a hose here that's attached over on the other side and comes to the front. And this is a connector hose, and it can connect to permeable soaker hose in their front garden. So it's a matter of simply opening up the valve and the water flows down with gravity feed and gently through that soaker hose. The other nice feature of having the rain barrel elevated like this is that the gardener can come over here. You see the little hose bib, the little faucet? You can just bring your watering can right there and fill it up. It's very, very convenient for then taking rainwater to other spots in your garden. So this is a nice example of location and maximizing access to rainwater that you collect in that location. Now, let me show you my 3 units. We have 3 downspouts on our house, and we have very different units on each one. And I'll take each one of these in turn and give you more information. But just to introduce them, This first one here is a very standard looking urn-shaped rain barrel, and it will hold up to 55 gallons of rainwater. This unit in the middle is probably not as familiar to your vision. It is short, it's squat, but it holds a comparable amount of water. It holds 54 gallons of rainwater, and it's actually in a crawl space, and I'll explain that in a few minutes. And then this larger one on the end, this is our cistern, and it holds 214 gallons. So let's take these one at a time and walk through them. So our urn-shaped rain barrel here, this is off the end of our back porch, and you can see the downspout has simply been altered to bring the rainwater directly into the top of the rain barrel. And there's screening here, and when the rain barrel fills up, there's an overflow, and we have PVC pipe that just takes it down and points it into the yard and away from the house. Now, something that is not visible on this picture is there's one of those little hose bibs, little faucet. It's on the back side of the rain barrel, and it is attached to soaker hose. And this bed along the side of our house, we actually converted lawn to a native plant pollinator garden. So it's a narrow bed, and the soaker hose, the lawn flows downhill from back to front. So it's a natural gravity feed. We did not need to elevate the rain barrel to get a good gravity feed on this. We just open the valve and it flows naturally into the soaker hose, and it provides watering for our native plant garden. Now, you can't see it here, but I just want to point it out in general for location purposes. The back of our house also has a second unit. And on this side of the house, back behind the columns, across the patio, you can see some shrubs here. And these shrubs are in a bed and they serve as screening. And I'll change the photo here. And this is an overhead view of that bed. So you see the screening shrubs here. They're hiding AC heat pump units. And then to the right of those units, this is our cistern. And normally you cannot even see the cistern. It's usually completely covered in vines. So I actually pulled the vines off of half of it. Otherwise you would just see a giant green blob here. But normally it's completely hidden. People never even know that we have it in our yard. And one thing that you can't see here that is really important that you may be wondering about is where's the downspout? How do you get water into the cistern when there's no downspout here? And the answer to that is if you look over to the left side of the photo, you'll see a garden gate. If you go through the gate and look immediately to your right, that's where the downspout is. So this is a picture of a section of that downspout. And you can see that we installed a diverter unit. And so when water comes down the downspout, it gets diverted into this PVC, which wraps around the corner of the house. So back up here, comes around the corner of the house and into the cistern. And it has a slight downward tilt. So it's a gravity feed. When it comes down the downspout, it just goes right through this, around the corner of the house, and into our cistern to fill it up. Once the cistern is full, the thing that the diverter does is it sends the water back through the downspout. So it just goes out the usual way. This cistern being this large at over 200 gallons, that's not really a unit where you're going to prop it up on a stand and use gravity feed to access that much water. That's not practical. It came with a pump, and I think units of this size usually do. And so across the way on a separate wall from where the cistern is, we have, you can see a little photo here, we have just a little toggle switch, and this is wired to turn on the pump in the cistern. So we just flip that up, and then once we do that, there are two different places where we can access that water. One is you see a hose that runs along the cistern, and down at the bottom you can see the end of the hose propped up on our patio. And I can use this just bringing my watering can over and fill it up. And I do that sometimes, but that's not why we have this little connector hose here. We use it to connect a longer hose to take the rainwater out to our fish pond when we need to top up the pond. And that is a huge value, and it's really great for our fish. Now, the way I normally access the water from this is actually across the patio. If you look Here you'll see on the privacy fence on the column, you see a hose. There's a hose bib on the side, and the plumbing for this was installed before the patio went in. So our cistern is actually connected to this plumbing. So when I turn on the pump, I can come out to this hose and just take it all around my patio, water all the containers, all the flower pots on my back porch, all the gardens around. So yes, 214 gallons is a lot of water, but it gets used very aggressively on the patio and in the yard. And it's a huge, huge benefit. I want to say this is my second favorite rain barrel. My absolute favorite rain barrel is this little squat unit that is in the crawl space beneath our front porch. And to explain this, I need to address the obvious, where's the downspout question? And it's the same kind of setup. Just outside the crawl space is the downspout, and it has a diverter unit, and it brings the water in to the top of the rain barrel. And once it fills up, then it just diverts it back through the downspout again. Now, my husband, being the engineering sort that he is, he devised this plan because just above this is an enclosed front porch that serves as the sunroom and also my office. And so while this did not come with a pump, he installed a pump as part of this setup. So he plumbed it to take the water up above. And you can see the outflow from the rain barrel here. Just outside of the view of the picture is the pump. So the pump collects the water and pushes it through plumbing to the room above. Before I show you that room, I just want to mention two other benefits in terms of how this is set up. By being in the crawl space, it's very protected, and the temperature is much more moderate than it otherwise would be. And my husband also insulated pipes associated with this. So I can actually access the water from this rain barrel 12 months a year. Every once in a while, at times in the past where it's gotten really bitterly cold and it stayed that way for several days, it has freezed up a little bit, but it never lasted very long. As soon as the weather gets a little bit mild, it just thaws right out and I go. So it's something we don't worry about for winterizing. It's a benefit to me year round. So this is the sunroom above. And if you were to walk in my front door and look to your right, this is what you would see. So you can see there are a number of plants around, and that's my office. If you were to look the other direction to the west, you would see a lot more plants. So there are a lot of things to water. And before we had the new setup, I would run back and forth to the kitchen with a watering can to water my plants. But now I have much nicer setup. You can see a large tall plant stand here, and immediately on the other side of the plant stand, I have a different photo of it here. You can see the plumbing comes up. There's a hose bib, and there's just a light curly hose that I can keep in a holder when I want to. That's available to me. So when I want to water my containers, there is a little on switch here that's a timer. And I turn that, and that turns the pump on down below. And then I just take the hose and take it around to any of the containers that I want to water. And it's so fast and so easy. I have to say, you can probably see why this is my absolute favorite rain barrel. Oh, let me point out too, this timer switch, it's a huge benefit because this being a front of a house and also my office, things can happen that distract me from what I'm doing. If someone comes to the door or if I need to get on a call, I can forget that I've left the pump running, and the timer switch doesn't forget. So it will tick off if I get pulled away and distracted. I really wish we could have that kind of feature on the toggle switch, or instead of the toggle switch that we have for our cistern in the back, but external requirements are different than internal requirements. But I love the setup. So just sharing a few lessons learned. Just to reiterate, know where and how you want to use the rainwater that you're collecting, because that is the whole value of doing that. And then make it easy to access, whether that means elevating a rain barrel or installing a pump with something, or simply the way you place something. Think about what's going to make it easiest for you to use it, because that's what you want to do. Something that people don't always recognize about the value of rain barrels is the value is in the using. You want to use that water as often as possible. That's your go-to first water resource. And when you do that, not only do your plants benefit, but you create more capacity inside your rain barrel. So even a passing shower, you're going to grab that water and use it, and then use it again, use it again. So you always want to be using the water so that the rain recharges the rain barrel, and that's really your payoff. And then finally, I want to say, control mosquitoes proactively. Rain barrels always come with some sort of screening or seal or what have you to keep out critters, keep out trash, keep out mosquitoes. But mosquitoes are very wily insects. And the only rain barrel we had a problem with was this little urn-shaped rain barrel. They either get through the screen or they get underneath the screen. But we started having a mosquito problem in this part of the yard, and I realized there were larvae in there. So I already had a good habit built for managing our pond once a month, the same day of the month, every month, April through October. I put mosquito dunks in the pond. That takes care of any larvae that our fish don't get to. And so that same day, every month, I put some mosquito bits in this rain barrel, and we do not have a mosquito problem. Colleen, do we have any questions?
We have a couple, Kathryn. You mentioned that there was a slight freezing problem with your rain barrel that's somewhat protected by the heat of the house. What about the other two? Do you ever have freezing in them, or do you have to drain them for the winter, or?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, they do need to be winterized, and the urn, we just drain it and we leave the drain open. I know some people will like take things into a garage or what have you. We haven't found that to be necessary. We just open it up and let it stay open, and the water naturally flows through. In terms of the cistern, we open everything up, but we use duct tape. When you look at the inside of the diverter, when the water gets diverted to be directed to the cistern, there's screening there to keep trash out that might come from the gutter system. And so we put duct tape over that so the water doesn't go through it. And in the spring, we unwinterize it. We remove the duct tape. That's what we
I
do.
myself love duct tape. One final question. Can you use the water that comes off the roof to water a vegetable garden, for instance?
University websites tend to advise against that. And I think there's a few reasons. Honestly, like things like animal poop, you know what? The yard's full of that. That's not really an issue. But there could be treatment that was given to the shingles and so forth. I know that everybody says that if you treat your shingles to prevent things like moss, you definitely want to be, super cautious about what you might do with that water that runs off of there. I know that there is some concern about it. I use it for everything, but I water the soil around my plants. I wouldn't like spray the rainwater on my tomatoes, but putting it in the soil, I feel like I'm totally comfortable with that. And I've been doing that for more than a decade, I'm sure. I can't even remember when that first rain barrel went in, a long time ago. So yeah.
Okay, great. That does it for the questions. Thank you and the other two speakers for a lovely presentation. We all appreciated it.
Okay, well, let me just say a few final words here to folks before you sign off. All of us who are affiliated with this presentation are volunteers with the Master Gardeners of Northern Virginia. And it's a big group. It's not just those you see today, but there are other forms of education that we provide to you all. So we have our live classes, but our Zoom classes are recorded, and there are a huge number of those on the website. We have a year-round help desk that will help you with your gardening questions. Spring through fall, we have plant clinics that extend those help desk services into the community, demonstration gardens, and so forth, and tremendous resources on our website. I do hope you'll visit our website, mgmv.org, and look around, because there really is almost an embarrassment of riches there to help you. I would also ask that you consider pressing the donate button when you're there. because while all of us are volunteers, we do have expenses associated with our website, our gardens, our plant clinics, and so forth. And we appreciate everyone who makes a small donation because that helps us as volunteers keep paying it forward ourselves. So thank you for that. And Colleen, I think it's a wrap now.
All righty, well, thank you. We'll see you all next time.